we're going to look at the Hebraic marriage custom. So we're going to look at culture, we're going to look at context, we'll look at verses, we'll look at how it went for other women, we'll look at what happened in the stories, because it's one thing to read stories, and it's another thing to read them in context. I think that's what happens when we read the Bible, and it seems different every single time you read it, is because the lens that you're looking at it through is completely different every time you look at it. So if you're reading, let's say, the story of Jacob, right, when he goes and works for Laban, if you're looking at it through a lens of, okay, I just want to know what the story was about, then you'll see one thing. But if you start looking at those little intricate details in the story, then you'll see something completely different. It won't be that the story changes, it's just that the lens that you're looking at the story changes. Okay? Let me grab that. Okay. So I have a couple of things we're going to look at. Oh, and I'm going to use, I'll refer to this a little later, I have it up, because we're going to look at these words. I had a sister of mine ask me a question, and she was like, okay, show me how all these things tie in. And you'll see how they all tie in, if the screen stays on, once we go through what the marriage custom is, because there's a lot of information, misinformation, and made up information out there about what marriage is, because everybody's gleaning from a bunch of sources. And what happens is, when people don't tell you where they're getting their information from, you think that they just came upon this on their own, and it was like the Ruach was giving them some kind of special, insight to something. But I'll just let you know, there's a couple of books out there that talk about Mesopotamian culture and context. One is Women of the Near East, if you want to write these down. Women of the Near East. Another one is by a guy named Martin Stoll, and it's, let me see if I can find it. It's called Women in the Ancient Near East. And then there's one, Women in Israel and the Ugaritic Society, I think. And so a lot of times people are saying things, and you're like, oh yeah, they're like, oh, this is our culture, this is our culture. You have to remember that the Hebrew culture was a set-apart culture. Even if they lived amongst these people, their customs and their culture would have still been different from them. There would be some things that were obviously very similar, but then there's some things that are very different. So if you're looking and saying, oh, well, the Sumerian women did this, okay, that works for them, but how does that line up with Torah? You say, oh, the Babylonian people, the Akkadian people, the Ugaritic people, you can make those assumptions because of the same area that they live, but all those things are not the same. Okay, let me pull this up and then I will be ready to go. Alright, so we're going to start, of course, as all things, in the beginning. It just, obviously, makes a lot more sense. Okay, so to start in the beginning, you can turn to Genesis. We're going to go straight to Genesis 2. Okay, Genesis 2, and we'll start with 18. And we're going to lay some basic fundamental groundwork, and then I'll explain to you why these things are so. We'll read why these things are so. Okay, one of the fundamental groundwork that needs to be laid is Genesis 2:18. It says, and Yahuwah said, it is not good that man should be alone. I will make a helpmeet for him. Okay, so the first fundamental point we have to make was that woman was made for man. That is a hard hurdle for a lot of people to get past. But if you start with a false premise there, then it's going to then skew everything else all the way out. We'll understand later why this is this way and how awesome this is, but from the start, because it's been used to misrepresent the position of the woman, it automatically puts everybody's head subservient. I don't have a place. I'm only going to do what this person tells me to do, and I was only created to do what. Right? It's just it seems very negative because of a lot of the authority that's over people that misrepresent what's actually happening here. Okay, so that's the point of delay, and then we'll get into the why. I think we talked last time when you were here. We talked about there are whys in Scripture, but you have to first accept that first truth. You can't change that first truth and then go looking for the why, because then the why won't be there. But if you leave it like it is and you go looking for the why, then the why is of course there. Okay. The first part of marriage. So we're just going to go through the list of how the custom works, and then we'll go and we'll actually look at it functioning in these people's lives. Okay. There is a doctrine out there that if you are in the late night and you're with a person and you sign a paper and it's just you, that person, and Yah, that at that moment you're married and that's it. And there's no agreement. There's just like, our agreement is that we're going to have sex and then you're going to be my wife. We don't get to understand what that means. It's not taught to the woman what this means. You're not given that person's expectation. You don't know what their intent is beyond that point. And so then it makes it tricky on the other end, because what we get into is marriage is a legal contract. It's very lawful and it's done in a very legal way. When you get into that, then you're stuck in it because you don't know how to get out, because you got in tricky, and it's going to be real tricky to get from under something that you were not truthfully brought into. Okay? There's this question of, is sex marriage? Okay, is it a part of it? Of course. It's a part of it, but what is that process? And that's lacking within our community of women, because they don't know what the process is. And you had a brother who's like, oh, you came over and studied scripts, now you're my wife. And it's like, whoa. I didn't know that that was an offer for marriage. Hey, come study with me. Well, I've been teaching you now, so actually I'm your head and I'm your authority. So now you my wife. You're like, whoa, okay. But then women are eager for a relationship. They're eager for a covering. So then they're like, well, okay, he knows the script. And then you find out that what you thought you had, you didn't have. And now you're stuck in a situation. And you were beguiled into a situation, it was not done forthright. So what we're going to learn is that our ancestors do things above board all the time. The men do things above board. You'll see people do things wrong, but it's always rectified with Torah. Okay? All right, so the first part of marriage is betrothal. Okay? We don't have this we have it a little bit in engagement, but ours is a little different because it starts later in the relationship. It's like, oh, we've already been in a relationship and now we're deciding that we're going to get married. Hebraically, and especially those who have younger children and you're going to raise them according to our custom, your preparation of your daughter is for marriage unless you've decided that her duty is to the kingdom, period. Okay? So your preparation is that. So betrothal for girls could happen very young, but that didn't mean that they got married very young. And so young based upon our standard, young based upon ancient standard, is we're always going to go with what the standard was. You'll see in those references I gave you for those books, you'll see contracts of where young children were betrothed at like 10 and 11 and younger, but they didn't get married until they were at the age to marry. So that's a very big misconception with Europeans when they start to assess and look at our culture, is that they say, oh, well, they were marrying off these quote-unquote children. And then I have to make the argument that a 15, 12, 14-year-old in that society compared to a 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old in our society, it's completely different. But if you just watch the times, everything becomes cyclical because now you have 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds. You're like, okay, whew. Okay, you don't kind of look like a 12-year-old. You don't kind of act like a 12-year-old, but they don't have the work ethic and they are not being trained, but they're participating in all the same things that. Okay, so I know it's hard sometimes to kind of put your brain in that area because you're like, that's a child, but you are not. American westernized society has trained us to coddle our children and not to raise them correctly. So they stay childlike too long. There's a time in the season for everything, right? Okay. Okay, so first part of marriage is betrothal. Two things. Parents choose or the male chooses, but the woman does have a say. In the contracts, if you look in those sources I told you, the women didn't, their voices were not in a written contract, but you have to think functional and not dysfunctional. And I know that's difficult sometimes because we have so much dysfunction, especially when it comes to functional male figures, where everybody's crooked, everybody's doing stuff for selfish gain, women are whoring off their daughters, fathers are whoring off their daughters. It's very dysfunctional. But if you think of a good father, because that's always the standard, is the good father, then you think of a father and a mother who have a functional relationship where the mother's in tour and the father's in tour, and they're doing what's best for their child. So think of it like this, because we all do it. You see a nice young lady, you're around her for a while, and you watch her, you're like, wow, she has her head on straight, she's going to school, she has goals, she da-da-da-da, and you go, you know what, she would be really good for. None of you thought, oh, now I'm arranging a marriage, but you are. You're hoping that when you present this person and this person, they go, you know what, they hit it off and it works. Now, because our focal point is off, when people are going to a relationship, they're not looking at all those things. Most males are not. They're looking for, well, does she fit this, which is normally a Western standard and not a Hebraic standard. But we all do. We all prearrange marriages in our minds. We do it with kids. You be like, that's a girl, you know, if you raise him right, and I'm going to raise her right, and then we do it all the time. So the parent, though, why can a parent choose a spouse for their child? Because you know your child better than anybody. You know your child better than they know themselves. So they'll walk in with a guy like, that ain't gonna work. Because you don't like to do this, and he gonna be like, In 3 months, you can do it just off the top of your head. Why? And if most of the time when we get older, we like, oh, I should listen to my mama. I should have went with this person and not this person because she said that. I should have listened to my dad because my dad is that. But we don't trust the authority of our parents. So the parents chose most of the time. And they would choose based upon values, right? Not value money, but values. So we'll look at a few, but we'll talk about Isaac and Rebecca. So when Sarah was like, I need you to find they were talking about finding a wife. So Abraham's like, go to this land. These are my people. Look at this family. I want somebody from here. Right? Why? They shared the same values. Like, okay, it's a bunch of people around here doing a lot of stuff. But at least they should be raising their daughters like this. He had seen a bunch of women. He's like, nope, this is how we do things. Go find someone here. So, good father, already thinking, okay, they're raising their daughters like this, which means I'm raising my son like this. I'm not going to just hook my son up with just anybody, right? And they're not just going to give their daughters just anyone. Why? When he came, they're like, okay, who are you? Who's your mom? Who's your daddy? We do it. We still do that. Who's your mom? Who's your daddy? Okay. Last name? So they over there, they live over there? Yeah. Okay, I remember your cousin. And they run through the whole thing. They're like, okay, we'll see. Right? Okay, so the idea that the parents chose. Second, let me give you the verse for that. Genesis 21 and 21. And there's a bunch of them, but I'll give you that one. And then Judges 14, 1 through 4, the male chooses. So a man can meet a woman and then say, you know what, I want to marry her. But then he has to go to his family and make sure that is acceptable with the family. Now, depending on the family and depending on how persistent the son is, you could get some bad things happening. Samson wanted Delilah. Mm-hmm. He kind of was like one of those guys who gets his heart broke a little bit, and then is like, you know what, I'm a pick from now. Because remember what happened to Samson had more than one wife. Samson's first wife got given away to somebody else. Yeah. He went nuts. And so next time he's like, okay, well look, I'm gonna handle this myself. Yeah, it didn't work out too well. But the male has the option to choose. Now let's get back to the female. So when you have a functional family, right? Once the father says, hey, this looks like a good person for you, there's not this like blind thing and I'm just gonna ship you off to their house. You get to meet them, right? And what happened, the mother first, of course, so this person's been brought, the father's talk, and the dad comes home, and he's like, okay, such and such down the road, remember him, you know, cousin such and such, and then, oh, yeah. Well, they got a young son, and he's doing X, Y, and Z, and he's blah, 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 and she's like, okay. So the discernment of the mother then goes, okay, let me think. You know, it's not in public, but they are counselors. And she can say, you know what, yeah, but what about this? You know, our daughter, da-da-da-da, and he's a little rough around the edges, and what if you know what, I didn't even think about that. You go back and go, you know what, maybe this might not be a good fit. That's it. That's the end of the story, right? Or the daughter might say, actually, I am in love with someone down the road. And because when we think about love, our love is always put into sex. We don't love anyone unless we've had sex with them. Mm-hmm. But in scripture, they would look at a person and be like, I'm done. Like, I'm all jacked up. I'm never going to be the same ever again. You only see like romance movies, or somebody walks by and the whole, like the world stops, and they're just like, I have to find her. It was like a crowd of people, we locked eyes, and I'm like searching on Facebook and Instagram, don't even know their name, just like, okay, he was in Fresno, maybe she tagged something, and you're like, right? Okay, so you have that element. And so if her heart was somewhere else, then it would have to be, okay, well then we need to talk to that family. So a daughter was considered when it came to getting a marriage. But if she was going to make a bad choice, the father and the mother have the ability to override whatever her thoughts are. I've heard it more in the elders when they were like, I got married at 16. And I've heard people say, I wasn't in love. But over time, I grew to love this person, became my best friend. I couldn't imagine myself with anybody else. A lot of us are so impatient with love that we don't allow the growth process in love because we go for the feeling. And what many of us have learned is the feeling is gone quick. Mm-hmm. You're like, do I like you? Did I ever like you? Right? But when there's room for love to grow in the natural and the real sense, then it actually becomes a lot longer lasting than I felt like this, I was attracted, and then I acted on my attraction. So the parents didn't act on that. They were like, look, we're going to choose for functional reasons, taking into consideration personality and what we know about that person, okay, and the way they're being raised. Okay, betrothal preceded marriage, okay? There is a period in time where these people get to figure out if they like each other. You don't just get betrothed at 12 p.m. in the afternoon because we went out to the chicken shack, and then it got late, and I think you're cute, you haven't gone home yet because we was Netflix and chilling, so now we married. Right? What kind of betrothal period was that? You don't know. You don't know. So what normally happened, even if they were younger, right? Once the wife was betrothed, or the young girl or the maiden was betrothed, then she was taken into the family's home. Or in some instances, the man stayed with the family. We've seen it both ways in scripture. And what that gave was two things. It gave time for observation, right? And it gave time for preparation. There has to be observation and preparation before marriage. So you can't really observe how a person lives just by talking on Facebook sometimes. You can't just observe how a person is living by just popping it up and seeing them sometimes on the Shabbat, right? So this is not the idea that you live with someone without supervision, because that was not the case either. It was the job of the family to guard the chastity of both parties. That's something we don't see either. If he was betrothed, he wasn't like, there was, and we'll go through the story. That time was designated for that person. So you got people who are betrothed to 4 and 5 different people at a time because they're like, I'm Hebrew and I can do that. That's not Torah. We'll get into the story of Jacob and Leah and Rachel. And you'll see that the father was like, okay, yeah, I tricked you, but you still have to give her time. And see, that's not something you see, where you have people who are not giving one person all of their time, and you got all these confused feelings. You're like, you call me somebody else's name because I made you feel like how this person made you feel. It's a bad betrothal. You're not investing all of your time, all of your intent, all of your resources into one place. That's why the betrothal was important. It preceded marriage. So Genesis 29:21, Deuteronomy 20:7, Matthew 1:24. Y'all look there. All right. So the next is the bride price. Now we're going to read through stories and see all of this. There is a price. What happened over time, because I know people ask me questions about like, well, what about the wedding ring? What happened over time, which if you go back, I would prefer the old custom, because the bride had a price that was paid for her, which was agreed upon. I think it was like 50 shekels, right? But then that doesn't mean that you paid 50 shekels for your bride, because then there was also a negotiation of price. There's like a contract price when you go down and get a marriage license, and like it's $74 and $53. I don't know. And so you pay the price of the paper, but then the families in some cultures still negotiate what the price and the agreement is going to cost between the family. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're buying a possession like cattle, but it does mean that you have to give a sacrifice for what you want. You don't give some, you don't, when you go out to buy a car, and if you have money, a car is a terrible investment, by the way. But if you go out to buy a car, right? You don't, when you buy it and you pay that much money, you take care of something you paid for. So people treat their Bentley different than they treat their work truck, right? So the idea of a bride price was for a couple reasons. One, it ensured that the family got something. And what a good father did was he gave a portion of the bride price to the bride. So that in the case of divorce, she had something. She wasn't just put out on the streets with nothing. It's happening in our community right now with our people because you have people entering into covenant without following the steps of covenant. And then when somebody says, oh, actually, I found out that when we signed that paper late at night, that wasn't Torah, so you're not really my wife. You're like, whoa, wait, no. Really? What? And so you are now without. Or he says, okay, I found something you I don't like. I'm on to the next. Then what? Right? So the bride price ensured that the groom was giving a sacrifice. And it was, when your family has to put up money, right? So right now, the only thing we understand like that is like school. Your family pays for you to go to college, and you go and blow their money. It's like the ultimate disgrace. It's like, whoa, we didn't have it like that. And we put aside money and we went without so that you can get education. And you out here, are you kidding me? It's the same thing where the family is like, okay, this is what you want. We're going to help you build your house. You're becoming a man, so you need a wife to build your house. We're going to invest in your future. And then we invest in your future. You're not going to blow it because it'd be dishonorable to your family. So it's a sacrifice for everyone. So back to the wedding ring thing. What the trickery is that we've been fooled into taking diamonds. And you know, diamonds are not worth anything. Right. I know that's hard to be like, what? Diamonds are forever. The reason, it's there's like a whole little like video, it's like a spoof, but it's hilarious. Like the reason why diamonds are forever is so they have no resale value. They're forever because you're stuck with them forever. That's why. If you've ever pawned or taken jewelry in, they give you the price of the gold. They don't give you the weight of the diamond. Like, it's real. It's real. So we've been tricked into taking the jewelry in exchange for the bride price, and then when it's all over, you're left with a ring that has sentimental value to you, but it means nothing financially. You can't go out and buy a house with it. You can't go out and even put down first and last month rent on an apartment if something goes wrong, right? So what it ensured was that the bride price ensured that there was something left. Now, lawfully, the bride price that was given to her was under the man's possession, but if he wrote her a bill of divorce, that had to go with her as well. And to my next point, this idea of marriage without contract is not Torah. Why? I tell you why. The marriage between us and as a nation had a contract. It was called the commandments. This was, are you going to do this? Then I'm going to do this. Are you going to do this? Then I'm going to do this. Are you going to have any gods before me? Are you going to keep these days? Are you going to covet? Are you going to... That was the marriage contract. They entered into a covenant through a contract, and it was written down for a reason. One thing that European people understand is that it's really hard to beat paper. They whoop us as Hebrew people all the time with that pen. Mm-hmm. They took our ancestors' land. They're like, oh, you sharecropping? Let me see. I'm going to make it so... yeah, it's your land, but you will not own it ever. Right? So this idea of having something written down, why? Because when you go to court, they go, but did you sign this? Well, in this, it said that you were going to, and so hard times, can't afford it, the land's mine. Your house is mine. Right? Same thing with the marriage contract. It does not take the spirituality out of marriage. It ensures that the intent that marriage was gone into stays that way. So you might say a bunch of things while you feel some type of way, but you forget it all when things go bad. One of the things that the marriage contract ensured was that, okay, if you said, I'll pick one that's a hot topic. Some people get married and then they end up with second, third, fourth wives. But why? Well, you didn't say that you didn't want to do that. Right? So then lawfully, he can say, but there's nothing that says you didn't. But if you, at the beginning, say, look, my intention, I love you, but I don't think that would work for us. Those are things that can be discussed before you marry somebody. But then you want to be mad about it after and really don't have a legal foot to stand on. But if in the beginning you said, okay, in our marriage contract we said that, if it came time that you wanted like 12 different wives, that would kind of ruin our relationship. So on that grounds, you would then have to release me so that you could build your family. And lawfully, he would have to be like, you know what, you're right. But a lot of people end up in bondage by verbal agreements and people not keeping their word. So what a marriage contract ensured was that the word that was said down be kept. Same way for a man. If you want a woman that was going to clean and that was going to have 10 babies and that was going to do, you need to write it down. Because then you can say, this is what we said we were going to do when we got married. You changed. So now if I put you away, it's based upon you not fulfilling what you agreed to. And nobody can be mad. It's not going to be this whole like, but you said it, it's like, it's right here. Have you seen how arrogant European people are in court? Mm-hmm. They don't care about nobody's feelings. They're like, you done? Because it's right here. The judge looks at it, he goes, well, you did sign this. And I'm looking at it, and there's really nothing I can do for you. It sounds terrible, but it keeps a lot of that strife and contention down. So I know a lot of, in the Ashkenazim, or the Jewish people, have ketubah, right? And they make a big deal of it, and they have all these things that they say you have to do. That's not Torah. But putting the intent, Torah-based intent, down, and letting it be known from the beginning is important. For instance, you have people marrying people who are not in Torah. And they're in Torah, they understand Torah, and they're like, well, what if I marry somebody that's not in Torah? And I'm like, That's not going to really work out because you have different vantage points now. A person would, that's why you see things done secularly that kind of like make sense. When people are like in other religions and people convert, because it's a contract. They're like, okay, I can't marry you and you're not going to keep Torah because in my marriage contract it says you have to keep Torah. So you have to either fully intend to keep Torah, we can't get married. So what do people do? I love you so much, I'm going to keep Torah, right? But then what happens if they don't keep Torah? Right? So you have that like fuzzy area where like you're setting yourself up for divorce is not wisdom. Because that's what it's going to eventually lead to if you have two people doing two different things. That was never the intent of our people to go out looking for somebody that was not going to keep Torah. They're like, oh, I'm going to force them. She my wife, and they go Muslim all of a sudden. And then they go, whatever the religion of the man is, the religion of the whole family. And you're like, I thought you was a keeper. You Muslim now? Because that's what Muslims do. They can marry any other woman because the religion of the father supersedes. But what we've learned through studying scripture and through Torah is that it don't matter what your religion is when you leave children home with a woman all day that's going to raise them. They will be Baal and Ashtaroth worshipers because when you're not around and when you're out all day, she's going to teach them the customs of her gods. You got Muslim men with Christian women, and she's teaching them about Jesus, and he's saying the kids just confused as they want to be, right? But what are they going to do? They're going to go with the religion of their mother, even though you're the head because she has a time with them. She's going to teach them her customs. So that doesn't work. Okay, so this idea of the next one is betrothal is marriage. Now that is something where there's this argument about whether or not it is or it isn't. Betrothal is marriage because marriage is contractual, right? So when you betroth, you're agreeing to marry this person. That's a contract. If you agree not to marry that person, guess what? You have to put that person away. You have to divorce them. You have to sever the contract. The words get confusing because we're using English words. But the word for divorce is karut. It means to cut. It means to cut the covenant. We made a covenant. It didn't work. We cut the covenant. It's not as difficult for scripture as it is for us emotionally. It's very simple. There is a covenant, right? You made a barit. You karut. They even rhyme a little bit, right? Okay, so the reason why marriage is a covenant is because you can't agree to something, and now we're putting all our eggs in this basket, this man that's paid this money, right? And they've signed this contract, and they've agreed on this time period or this betrothal period, and then you whore off your daughter, because that's what it is when you do this, and you go, she's very attractive. I'm going to get his money, and his money, and his money, and his money, and they'll all be betrothed to her, and I collected all this money, and there's going to be an uproar. Because then they're going to be like, well, whose wife is she? Right? So that's why it was marriage. It was contractual. Once you agree that that person's, it can't belong to somebody else. Okay, so this idea that there's no possession in Torah is not really correct. In her mind, she belongs to him. And in his mind, he belongs to her. It's not like, you mine, but I'm free. When I'm with you, but when I'm not, you and me, but I'm not with you. That's not the idea that is put forth in Scripture. He was responsible for her, and she was responsible for keeping herself for him. So what else? The other thing that betrothal did was that it ensured that the chastity of that person was kept. That was very important. And once again, we'll work through some stories. Okay, so betrothal is marriage. Deuteronomy 22, 23, and 24 literally talks about how you have to, if that person is betrothed and they decide they don't. Because one of the things that happens, and I don't know if it applies in all senses, but I think it's a duality. The verse that says if he finds something that he does not like in a woman, then he can divorce her. That doesn't always mean that he has married her in the sense of completing the contract, which is sex, and they have children, and da-da-da. It could mean that during the betrothal period, a brother can say, you know what? My mama called the other day, and she noticed a couple things, and I don't think this will really work. Like, you be sneaking and bowing down the aisles and thought you could work the other day. You was like, you don't read the labels on the back of stuff like that. You don't read the labels. This stuff is not going to work out very well. And that's the thing that happens with us. And I've seen it happen a lot in Western society, especially amongst our people who live in Western society. In a relationship, at the time, let's say in the courting period, let's say we're courting according to Torah, so we're dating. In the dating period, even once you've caught feelings, right? And you like, wow, I really like this person, they got good conversation, keeping it kosher. When the time comes where a red flag goes off, what makes us go, oh, but I'm gonna keep moving forward? Like, you just ignore them. Like, I don't know what that is, because during that period, that space and time for betrothal is so that you can actually begin to see the newness wear off, and you can really see a person for who they really are.
Yeah.
And once they, like my Angela said, once a person shows you who they are, believe them. Mm-hmm. Right? Because if you don't believe them, they're not going to change who they really are. A person can, for a little bit of time, pretend to be somebody else.
Right.
But it doesn't last very long. Everybody says it too, like, you were so different in the beginning. No, they were pretending. Then they turned into who they really are, and you didn't like that. When they turned into who they really were, and you saw that, you should have let them go. But what we tend to do is chase the beginning, and you're never going to get that person again. Mm-hmm. That person was that way while the feeling, that emotional thing that everybody told them to follow, was there. It leaves. Marriage is a contract. It's more based on commitment to the covenant than it is how you feel. Doctor, I think we talked about this a little bit last time. Your feelings change. If I get hungry, I do not like my husband. I'm just like, oh, your beard is crooked. Like, everything irritates me. Everything does. Now, like the sticker commercial, where he's like, you have a sticker, and you're like, whoo, oh man, because your feelings change. You can be just in a mood. It can be gloomy outside. You're just like, I'm gonna run away. Like, your feelings change, but your commitment to the covenant doesn't. And so we see it obviously in the Father, where we are all over the place, and he's just like, streamline. This is my covenant. This is what I agreed to. I'm not chasing you this way or this way, but when you come back, I'll be right here. I don't waver. Right? That's how we're supposed to be. And likewise, the men in our community are supposed to be when they're finding women. We don't bend Torah to get what we want. And when we see red flags, we apply Torah to it. We don't then go, oh, well, I just love him so much. God's like, I love you, but I'm about to beat you. Like, it's like, I'm going to put you back on the right path. I'm not going to say, well, I just love her so much. Right? No, it doesn't work. Okay, so the last one, obviously, is the betrothal between Yah and his people. So we're actually, before I get to that one, we're going to go through these two stories just to get a functional picture, because I want to bring out a couple of things. Let's go to Genesis 24. All right, so we're going to do Isaac and Rebecca. And we're going to go through, we're going to look at these things we talked about and see if our ancestors followed the process. What we're also going to see is this process is before there was a written Torah, which means that there was Torah before it was written down. There was law on how things are supposed to be carried out. Okay? All right. I'm going to read from the King James if I can find it. There we go. All right, it says, and Abraham was old and well stricken in age, and Yahuwah had blessed Abraham in all things. And Abraham said unto his eldest servant of his house that ruled over all that he had, put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh. Right, so he's making an agreement with him. And I will make thee swear by Yahuwah, the Elohim of heaven and the Elohim of the earth, that thou shalt not take a wife unto my son of the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell. First thing he was like, do not get him no Nicki Minaj. I'm just going on record and say this. Not that anybody should have this, I don't have this kind of confidence in people, but I am so disappointed in Nas. Right? Yeah. Like, if you don't know who it is, it's just like, I mean, it's not that he's like But he's supposed to be super conscious and like Nicki Minaj. I'm not knocking her though. Maybe she's trying to like get her life together. But I was just like, in these last days, that's what you chose. I'm just like, okay, so not that he's like Isaac or anything, but I was just like, whatever.
That was Khalees before that. So.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It just at least she was a little more.
She had natural hair.
Right. She didn't have that line.
It shows where his mind is.
It shows where his mind is. It shows you that these people who claim to be conscious but are not in Torah are not conscious at all.
That's exactly.
And that's what it showed me. It was just like, oh, I thought it was hope. I don't know why, but yeah.
A wicked woman is given to
A wicked woman is given as a portion to a wicked man.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. And so he says, don't get him a wife from these Canaanites. Verse 4, but thou shalt go unto my country and to my kindred and take a wife unto my son Isaac. I'm going to touch on this point just briefly. I know people ask me. People always ask me about people marrying into other nations. Don't laugh. I'm gonna deal with this from a legal standpoint. Legally, the inheritance of the people, meaning land and portion, right, does not transfer. It can't leave the tribes. So you can marry a person, but your inheritance has to stay with your tribes. Does that make sense? Did I answer that? So that's how it was when Manasseh's daughters went to Moshe, and they're like, from the tribe of Manasseh, but they were, I can't remember who their dad was, but he had no sons, and they were like, okay, but shouldn't we get land? And Yah said they have said correctly, give them land, but they have to marry amongst the men of their tribe so that the allotment of the land stays with their tribes. So can you marry outside? Well, yeah, but the inheritance stays with the tribes. And so that's the thing where it gets confusing for people. It's like, do you want it? Hey, that's something that you have to work out in your own personal self. Also, you still can't marry outside of tribes that are not in Torah, and you can't marry a Hebrew roots person that just keeps Torah sometimes, but they don't really believe that, like, the people of the Bible are the people. Like, that's not going to work either. Like, don't be like, well, he reads his Bible and he goes to church. No. Well, he's a Muslim. No. Well, he's Jehovah's Witness, so we don't celebrate birthdays, they don't celebrate pagan holidays. No! Right? You're not picking and choosing, because then you will find your lot and inheritance with that person. And you'll just be frustrated. Like, it's not, your feelings, like I said, will change. Marry Yah's way. That is just like the end of it. Like, honestly, marry the way that Yah has said to marry, because he has a reason why. He's a father. He knows his daughters, and he knows the kind of men you need, and he knows the kind of authority you need, and he knows the kind of respect you need, and he knows the kind of struggle you're in. And sometimes when you marry other people, the struggle can't be seen. I know a lot of people who have Caucasian husbands, and as much as you can perceive the struggle of the disenfranchisement of the people, you still benefit from white privilege every day. Yeah. And so those who do, though, really, really understand. I say this all the time. I truly believe that not all white people with white skin are white, right, and not all black people with black skin are black. So in saying that, though, I know some people who've got some husbands who are fair skinned, but I'd be dang, I'd be like, you migrated. I have a sister of mine, her husband is so like, because really, honestly, and this is a bias of mine, I truly believe that if you are truly not the fathers and unmelanated, you can't see this at all anyways. Right. Yeah. That your privilege does not let you see it. Those who give up their privilege, I believe, have been called already, because that's very, very, very difficult. Our people who could pass during slavery times would not dare unveil the fact that they were who they really were, because of the oppression that came with being that. So when a person who is unmelanated takes the stands and really suffers, not just like marches and flashes their boobs like they do in San Francisco,
Right.
but I mean like really stands up for the people, even in the face of people who have always thought, well, you're just like us. Those people, I'm gonna do a, like they say, if they're not Hebrew, I'm doing a draft trade, because I got some people who I would trade for some of them, period. Okay, so just take that in mind though, when we are dealing with people and looking at people, that it's further than that. It's further than that. Okay, all right, so he said, don't get them from among these nations, get them from my own family. Why? Inheritance, of course. And then custom. Okay, he says, and take a wife unto my son Isaac. And the servant said unto him, peradventure the woman will not be willing to follow me unto this land. Must I needs bring thy son again to the land from whence thou camest? If she's not going to follow you, don't chase her. Abraham said, he's like, he's gonna say it right now. He said, and Abraham said to him, beware that thou bring not my son thither again, Yahuwah of heaven, which took me from my father's house and from the land of my kindred, and which spake unto me, that swore unto me, saying, unto thy seed will I give this land. He shall send his angel before thee, and thou shalt take a wife unto my son from thence. He was like, oh no, we don't bend. If she don't want to come, she's not the one.
That's right.
Period. If she don't want to follow you back here, then she's not his wife. Okay? And he says, and if the woman be not willing to follow thee, then thou shalt be clear from this my oath, only bring not my son there again. Look, then he don't need a wife. He not gonna have one. We'll wait. It wasn't an eager thing. It was like, okay, I know there's somebody back there, but if the Most High is not moving on that person the same way that I'm moving to bring someone to my son, then don't. So many times we force what we feel like, oh no, this is the one for me. Okay, but he not ready.
Yeah.
So maybe down the line, but you're just like, well, I'll just wait for him to grow then. You're like, no. You get him like that, you don't have the ability to grow him. The Most High does. Most High have to take some people through some things. Sometimes we get people and we see the potential, because that is one of the gifts of women. We see the end goal. We always look past a person. It's like, okay, yeah, he's rough right now, but I could fix him up. Yeah, I was like, no, the fixing part is mine. And like, in the same way for men. Look at a woman, you're like, no, I can get her. She on the pole, but if you wrap her head just right, and you throw on a skirt with some fringes, and you're like, no, you just got a very well covered stripper. That's what you ended up with. We do that though. We know we do. There's too many songs about it. I'm not even gonna say them, but you can't turn okay. And he said, verse 9, and the servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham his master and swore to him concerning the matter. And the servant took 10 camels of the camels of his master and departed, for all the goods of his master were in his hand. So did he take something with him, or did he just go empty-handed? Took something with him. Okay. And arose and went to Mesopotamia unto the city of Nahor. Or not Nahor, yeah. And he made his camels to kneel down without the city by a well of water at the time of the evening, even the time that women go out to draw water. So he went to a place, he was like, all the women of the city better come out here. He was literally like, it was like a needle in a haystack kind of situation. Every woman was coming out to get water. Right? And so he said, and then let it come to pass then that the damsel, verse 12, and he said, O Yahuwah, Elohim of my master Abraham, I pray thee, send me good speed this day and show kindness unto my master Abraham. He prayed too. This is a servant. This is not even the person that's looking for it. He prayed. He was like, okay, I know what I'm coming to look for. And I know what I might see with my eye, but you show me something different than what I may perceive. Okay, because we look with carnal eyes and stuff. He might find the cutest one out there and she... And he says, behold, I stand here by the well of water, and the daughters of men of the city come out to draw water. And let it come to pass that the damsel to whom I shall say, let down thy pitcher, I pray thee, that I may drink, and she shall say, drink, and I will give thy camels drink also. Let the same be she that thou hast appointed for thy servant Isaac, and thereby shall I know that thou hast shown kindness to my master. And it came to pass, before he had done speaking, that behold, Rebekah came out, whom was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, with her pitcher upon her shoulder. And the damsel was very fair to look upon, so you could see her. A virgin, nevertheless, had any man known her, and she went down to the well and filled her pitcher and came up. And the servant ran to meet her and said, Let me, I pray thee, drink a little of thy water. And she said, Drink, my master. And she hasted and let down her pitcher upon her hand and gave him drink. And when she had done giving him drink, she said, I will draw water for thy camels also until they have done drinking. You know camels can drink a lot of water. She wouldn't. She already drew water, mind you. And then she's getting ready to draw water again. And again. And again. Until they were done drinking. It meant until they were full. So you learn a bunch of things about her by that one thing. One, she wasn't lazy. She wasn't one. No, I'm just kidding. She wasn't weak. She wasn't like this frail. When you see the pictures where they're sitting there like this blonde hair and they're sitting there like, no, she came out there like, she was like, no, I got this. Yeah. I got this. And she said, and she hasted to empty her pitcher into the trough, and then ran again unto the well to draw water and drink for the camels. I didn't make that up about again. And the man, wondering at her, held his peace, to wit whether Yahuwah had made his journey prosperous or not. So he didn't jump on it. He wasn't like, oh, she drew the water. He was like, let me wait. I'm going to wait. And it came to pass, as the camels had done drinking, that the man took a golden earring of half a shekel weight, and 2 bracelets for her hands of 10 shekels weight of gold. And said, Whose daughter art thou? Tell me, I pray thee. Is there room in thy father's house for us to lodge in? And she said unto him, I am the daughter of Betrothal, the son of Milcah, which she bare unto Nahor. She said, Moreover unto him, we have both straw and provender enough, and room to lodge in. And the man bowed down his head and worshipped Yahuwah. And he said, Blessed be Yahuwah Elohim of my master Abraham, who hath not left destitute my master of his mercy and his truth. I being in the way, Yahuwah led me to the house of my master's brethren. And the damsel ran and told him of her mother's house these things. And Rebekah had a brother, and his name was Laban. And Laban ran out unto the man unto the well. And it came to pass, when he saw the earring and the bracelet upon his sister's hand. So you see Laban? He's in the story more than once. You'll see him again. You'll meet Laban again. Okay, thus spake the man unto me. And he came unto the man, and behold, he stood by the camels at the well. And he said, Come in, thou blessed of Yahuwah. Wherefore standest thou without? For I prepared the house and room for camels. And the man came in the house and girded the camels and gave straw and provender. Okay, so you see a couple things. He didn't come empty-handed. So I know they're going to come back in a second, so I'm going to give you the end of this. So what happens then is he gives her something which says, okay, you're green. He gave her the ring. She knew what that meant. Okay? This random man is not coming on a camel with a caravan for no reason. So she peeped game, right? She's like, okay, I've never even met this man. But if he sends someone like this, in this manner, I'm going to be mindful. Right? And it wasn't because of what he had, it was the way he came. Right? And this wasn't even the person. And Isaac didn't even send her. His daddy did. I mean, send the servant, his dad did. So he gives her the ring, the nose ring, and he gives her the bracelet. So this is this idea of, this is something, how can I put it? It's like a reminder, because you didn't have to necessarily give anything, but it's like, this shows that you belong to somebody, right? I'm just going to fast forward really quickly. When we get to this idea of betrothal, because a lot of people mix up, obviously, marriage and betrothal. When it comes to Yah marrying his people, especially when you get to the Brit Kadashah, the New Testament, everybody thinks that they're in. Even though Scripture says it's to those who endure to the end, right?
Right.
So when HaMashiach comes, he pays a bride price. In Christian church, they tell you when he says it is finished, they're like, oh, it means it is finished. If you look it up, and I wish I had it up here, but it's a challenge, so I look it up. If you look it up and you look at what he said, he actually said, I've paid for my bride in full. They didn't say it is finished, because now they use that to say you don't have to do anything. Yeah. No, I've paid the bride price. But just because I paid the bride price does not mean I have to marry her. If she does not remain without spot or wrinkle, I don't have to take her. And so the same way that the servant gave her this thing, he then said, okay, I'm going to leave something with you as a reminder of who you belong to. Right? He gave her the jewels as a reminder of who she belongs to. The Hamashiach says, I'm going to give you the Ruach as your comforter, but it's a reminder of who you belong to. So that when I return, you're supposed to remain without spot or wrinkle because you know that you've already been paid for. Okay? So he gives her these jewels, and he then goes to the house. And so what there's going to be, well, let's just read it because it pretty much tells the story. Okay, so, and there was set meat before him, verse 33, but he said, I will not eat until I told my errand. So he didn't stay, okay? And he said, until he told why he was there. So he stays, he says, and Yahuwah hath blessed my master greatly, and he has become great, and he hath given him flocks and herds and silver and gold, and maidservants and menservants and camels and asses. And Sarah, my master's wife, bare a son to my master when she was old, and unto him hath he given all that he had. And my master made me swear, saying, Thou not takest a wife of the sons of the daughters of the Canaanites, into whose land I dwell, but thou go unto my father's house, and to my kindred, and take a wife unto my son. And I said unto my master, peradventure the woman not. He's telling the whole story. There's no secrets, right? She knows up front, like this is what's required of you. And he says, peradventure the woman not follow me. And he said to me, Yahuwah, before whom I walk, will send an angel with thee, and prosper thy way, and thou shalt take a wife from my son, my kindred, and my father's house. Then shalt thou be clear from this oath when thou comest to my kindred. And if they give not thee one, then thou shalt be clear from my oath. And so he tells the whole story. We just read the story. She made headies, put down her picture, and so he's telling the story because he's like, I need to confirm with you what's been presented to me. And so he says, and I bowed in my head and worshipped Yahuwah and blessed Yahuwah, my master Abraham, which had led me in the right way to take my master's brother's daughter into his son. And now if you will deal kindly and truly with my master, tell me, and if not, tell me, that I may return to the right hand or to the left. Then Laban and Bethuel answered and said, the thing proceeded from Yahuwah, we cannot speak unto thee bad or good. Behold, Rebekah is before thee, take her and go, and let her be thy master's son's wife, as Yahuwah has spoken. And it came to pass, that when Abraham's servant heard these words, he worshipped Yahuwah and bowed himself to the earth. And the servant brought forth jewels of silver and jewels of gold and raiment. So he already gave her something, right? Then he had more stuff. He said jewels of gold, raiment, he had clothes, gold, and gave them to Rebekah. He also to her brother and to her mother precious things. How many of y'all got me movie giving me? Like movies? You want me to bring over some dinner rolls? I thought y'all was cooking. And they did eat and drink, and so part of a covenant is there's always a meal that happens with the covenant. So like he said, let me tell what I'm here for first, right? So once they sat down and had the meal, it solidified everything. Also, he went on behalf of his master to get a bride. That theme follows all the way through Scripture. He was just as much, when he said these things and he came with these things and he did these things, it was just like Abraham was there himself. They respected him the same exact way. That is also something that travels all the way through. And he says, and he and the men that were with him and tarried all night, and they rose up in the morning. He said, send me away unto my master. And her brother and her mother said, let the damsel abide with us a few days, at least 10. After that she shall go. What is that period? It's a preparation period. So this was 10 days for them. One, they were like, let us get some stuff straight. Let's get her prepared so that she can meet him. This idea of just like running off into the wind is not there. The advantage that she had, as you can see, was she was raised in Torah. She had already exceeded all the expectations. The Most High had already chosen her. But even still, then they were like, okay, but still let us prepare her first. Okay? So, and he said, hinder me not, seeing who hath crossed my way, and send me that I may go to my master. And so they said, we will call the damsel and inquire at her mouth. So they wanted to keep her for 10 days. He said, let me go. He said, let us ask her then. You don't see that often. That's something that's just like glassed over and glazed over because women don't have an opinion. They said, let us call her and see what she wants to do. And they called Rebekah and said unto her, wilt thou go with this man? Question. And she said, I will go. So they wanted her to tarry, right? But Abraham said, if she gonna come, come. And so she could have said, you know, I do want to stay with my family a little bit. And I want to, she's like, no, I'm gone. I'm out. Catch you later. Right? And they blessed Rebekah and said unto her, thou art our sister, be thou the mother of thousands of millions, and let thy seed possess the gate of those which hate them. And Rebekah arose and her damsels, and they rode upon the camels and followed the man, and the servant took Rebekah and went his way. And Isaac came from the way of the well, Lahori, for he dwelt in the south country. And Isaac went out to meditate in the field at the eventide, and he lifted up his eyes and saw, and behold, the camels were coming. Okay? She didn't tarry. She was prepared and ready. There is a big difference between a person being prepared for you and a person not. And everybody assumes that somebody's prepared for them. Mm-hmm. Right? Where they're like, no. But in this case, she was. And he said, and Rebekah lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she lighted off her camel. And we're talking about that whole idea of like love at first sight. What made her get off the camel and run? Like hopped off of it, like I'm off. And for she had said unto the servant, what man is this that walking in the field to meet us? And the servant said, it is my master. Therefore she took a veil and covered herself. I'm not even going to that. Okay. And the servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent and took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her, and Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. All that stuff happened before he actually got her and lay with her. Because remember, that journey was not short either. So we don't know how long it was, but he had to take provisions. He had to walk. The camels needed water. He stayed overnight. Then he went back. We'll have to get a map and see how far it was. But even then there was that time of he had to be thinking something when he went. And she was asking questions on the way back. She's like, okay, you got closer. Who is that? Oh, that's him. Okay. Well, let me continue on in my custom until I get with this man. Okay, next one, quickly, because I know this is where a lot of contention comes from. Genesis 29. And I'm going to just briefly go through the story. Most of us are familiar with it. So this is Jacob. Jacob is going, same thing. Going to find a wife. Guess whose house he goes to? Laban, right, was Rebekah's brother. Okay? So it also shows you that, like, when you have a biblical timeline, you can see that a lot of people lived close in sync with each other. Like some time periods overlap. So you have Laban, who probably was younger at this point, but he was all in the business even then. But he's like, yep, she gonna go. Yeah, that's a good idea. So when it was time then for those children to get married, she went back to her brother. Rebekah sent her brother. Okay. So Jacob, obviously Esau, we know he married the Canaanite women. So yeah, he didn't listen. He was like, they twerk. It's enough said. So Jacob goes and he sees Rachel. That's the first one. He's like, well, I'm gonna marry her. Okay, so he gets there, same thing, agreement. He's like, okay, give me my daughter. It's all good. But you gotta work for it, pretty much. So it came a little different. He didn't come with like a caravan and the jewels and like all the fluff. Because Isaac had everything. Jacob had inheritance too, but he was willing to work for his. And that's also something that we don't see. You have people who are like, I want you, I don't have nothing, but hey, you love me, right? No, he was like, no, I will work and build up mine until I take this woman into my life. I'll do what I need to do to appease whatever it is that this father wants. He agreed. Contract. It was agreed between the two of them. He works for 7 years. Something tricky happens, and he gets Leah and not Rachel. obviously it works out for the greater good because in Yah's providential care we get Judah. And that came from Leah. That wasn't the woman that Jacob chose. He chose Rachel. But I will say this. Jacob, this is the argument that is within our community. And when women don't have a voice, but we think about things a little differently, you can keep perpetuating a thought that is partially true. Because I told you providential care. But did Jacob go for one wife or two wives?
For one.
He went for one. He got a bonus wife. It's funny. It's true. But for a purpose, most I can do whatever he wants. But he went for one. Most people say, well, the patriarchs had, and you always go back to Jacob, and I'm like, okay, but when he went to find a woman, he went for one. He ended up with two. So we have to keep that context in place. Did it happen? Yes. Was it permissible? Yes. But what was his intent? Right? It's a little different. Okay. So he goes, It was still under contract. Even those. So he ended up with two. There's a point that I want to. There's a part that I want to point out though, and I was talking about the time where this whole thing where like I'm talking to a bunch of people all at the same time. In that passage, let's go to it. It talks about when he finds out that he gets Leah instead of Rachel, and Laban's like, you know what? You're right. I got you, but I'm gonna give you Leah, but I'm going to give you Rachel, but after Leah's week is up, right? So there was a space in time where he was only supposed to be devoted to that woman, right? So let's go 29. Go over. Okay. You know, there's another key part that's there. Let me see.
Was it 26, 27?
He loved Rachel. Like literally. He like wept when he met her. That's we don't see that either. We always get this like, because of slavery, our men have been hardened. And we don't get to experience you don't be soft for everybody, but you should be at least soft for the woman you're with. Right. We don't get to see that, where a person really expresses their emotion, how they feel about a woman. But like let me find the verse. It blows me because it's something that over time in the more we walk in Torah, we see it more. But it's sad that a lot of women don't get to experience that from our men because they have to be so tough and hard, and vice versa. Our men don't get to experience it from us because overworked, underpaid, underappreciated, right? It goes both ways.
26, 11 is where he wept.
11 is where he wept. So verse 11 says, and Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's brother and that he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. And it came to pass. Also, our people were very appropriate. He wasn't like tonguing her down. Right. Okay. Like, right. He was just like happy that he found family the same way that this man, the servant Abraham was happy. It wasn't like, oh, like you don't just walk up to somebody and kiss them. That's not appropriate. That's so European. Like you don't just tongue somebody and you don't even know them. It's no. And here you go. And it came to pass when Laban heard the tidings of Jacob, his sister's son, and he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him. Did he kiss him like that? I doubt it. So he says that he's going to work for her. And he says, and Jacob loved Rachel and said, I will serve thee, verse 18, 7 years for Rachel thy younger daughter. And Laban said, it is better that I give her to thee than that I should give her to another man. Abide with me. And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel. And this is the part, which is warms my heart. And they seemed unto him but a few days for the love he had for her. He worked for 7 years. It was nothing. Like, right? Okay.
That's a betrothal process.
Man, so it was a process. That was a 7-year process. And he didn't get her. You'll see that he doesn't get her until after the 7 years. He wasn't like working 7 years and then like being with her during this time. No, he worked for 7 years and then got her. Now, there could be a bunch of inferences. She could have been younger, which means that she had to come of age. She could have been, or that could have just been an agreement. Whatever it was, he worked for 7 years. That meant that you saw this person every day and he loved her that much and he had enough self-control Because we have this thing that we don't understand that he wasn't like going to break his agreement because that was the agreement. So you're seeing something like they lived it. He was there. He said, abide with me and work. And he worked. Okay, so he ends up with 2 wives within a 1 week period though. He didn't work another, that was something I was talking to Maury about this morning. He didn't work another 7 years and then get Leah. He worked for 7, then he got Leah, and then he waited a week and he got Rachel, and he worked for another 7 years to pay for her. So he had 2 wives in that 7-year period, and they had a bunch of kids. Because I had always thought it was like, oh, you had to work another 7 years. You worked 14 years before you. No, it was that same period. There's another thing I want to point out. There was a note on top of my page. Rules for a nation. Torah doesn't change ever, but there are some different things that are reiterated once the people become a nation that seem contradictory to what happens before we get a written Torah. So we get a written contract for a nation. And one of the things that seems contradictory is that obviously Jacob had 4 wives. Technically he had 2 handmaidens and then 2 wives, right? And but when you get to Torah, it says that a man, if he's going to take more than one wife, he can't take the sister, lest there be strife, which obviously goes directly against what we see with Jacob. So there are some things that are instituted for a nation, for national functioning, that may have been permissible when they were still there, Torah, but it was oral for the most part. Everybody understood the rule because remember, I think Shem was still living when Abraham was born.
Yeah.
That gives you like the time picture. And right. He was still alive. So that shows you that like they also carry over whatever was instituted from the garden. Remember, I think Noah was born, I think, 100 years shy of meeting Adam, 100 something years, which meant that Noah's father, though, had met Adam. So it wasn't like you had like these generations of information being passed down that got like mixed up along the way. There was a very, very close understanding of what was permissible and what was not, and then obviously going into other nations like our people do, they pick up other things and they start to mix and grab things. And so when he gives Torah to a nation, he corrects the things that may have been jacked up. I'm going to go a little step further. So then when you get to the Brit Kadashah, the New Testament, and the HaMashiach comes on the scene, and he begins to explain things, it's the same way. You had people who had the Torah, and they picked up things from other places, and they began to add and take away and do things, and then when the word came in the written form, it corrected whatever was not their original intent. And then over time, after you get the written Torah and people begin to pick up things and things begin to change, when you get to the Brit Kadashah and you get the word in the flesh and it comes, then it corrects the things that along the lines had gotten blurred and they had been in captivity and they had picked up different things. Okay, betrothal between Yah and his people. I'm going to give you these verses. Hosea 2:19 and 20. He says, and I will betroth you to me forever. I will betroth you to me in righteousness and in justice, and in steadfast love, and in mercy I will betroth you to me in faithfulness, and you shall know that I'm Yahuwah. So remember I told you the betrothal is the same thing as marriage. And obviously there's not that idea of the sexual consummation in a... So when you talk about betrothal, it's this idea of there is a contract where I am saying that I am forever going to carry out these things for you. You can interchange with the word marriage. I'll be married to you forever. But this idea of I am assuming responsibility for you as a people forever. There's really another verse, and somebody wants to Google it, pull it up. He says, go ahead.
You said that was Hosea.
2:19 through 20. Yes. There's another verse that he says, if I ever not keep my covenant with you, then everything, the heaven and earth will pass away. The same way that people in modern religion say, well, if Jesus is not Jesus, and if this is not that, then the whole Bible and the world will roll like a scroll. Well, before that was said, let's deal with the fact that he said, if his people cease to exist,
Yes.
then heaven and earth will cease to exist first. So his word is what was said about that. So you can't take one part of the word and say, oh, well, heaven and earth will roll like a scroll if the Bible's not true. So if we're not his people, then nope, we're still here. So it's all embedded within the process. Okay. Let's go to Revelation 19. And 7 through 9. You hear it a lot. I'm sure a lot of people, if you came out of Christianity, you heard it that the institution of marriage is similar to Christ, as they say, but it's actually His people, and it's mirrored again with the Hamashiach and the same people. Right. It's the word and the people, and the word and the people, and the word and the people, and the word and the people, all the way through the whole thing. This idea of switching out, playing semantics, and then giving like a demigod who somehow came down like Hercules and had to fight his way back up to Mount Olympus to then take over for his father Zeus. But we don't believe that. It doesn't exist. And what we believe, it has always been the same from the beginning. When you mar that and you change it into something else, and you say, oh no, Christ is a new thing. I've been to seminary for a little while. I made it a whole 2 months. Ambition will get you in trouble. I was like, ooh, I can get a master's and be working my bachelor at the same time. I'll just go to this, Christian school, and I already knew the truth at that time. I was like, it ain't gonna bother me that much. 2 months, I was out. I don't even know if it was a whole 2 months, but one of the things that I was told is that the New Testament is a new thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, how? There's only one covenant. The covenant that we saw between Abraham and the houses, it's all the same covenant. It was all based upon the same promise. He was keeping the covenant to continue the promise that was given to the seed all the way throughout. So how do you get to a new book and get a new covenant when the whole idea of testament is the word covenant? Mm-hmm. And it's not new, it's renewed. Every time you saw our people go into covenant or break covenant, then Yah said, and I'll take you back when you turn to me. It is a renewal of the covenant. So what they were supposed to see when they got to the Brit Kadashah, or the new covenant, was a restoration of that same covenant that had been traveling down through all these people. But when you hijack it, and then you put some confusion, I don't even know who you put an idol, right, in front of the people and say, okay, now this is your God. And this is the covenant that comes with your God. And then you read the book, and you go, but he didn't say that. And then, no, he did. You're just looking at it wrong. And after somebody tells you that so many times, you know what tends to happen? It's just like being in a bad relationship. You can be with a guy, right? And you know he's wrong. Mm-hmm. You know he is. You're like, he is a dog. But after so many times of him telling you, baby, that ain't true. You gonna believe everybody else instead of me? All of a sudden you're like, am I gonna believe everybody else instead of him? It's the same way with how you glaze over, where you can read something for yourself in one sense and see that streamline of a covenant all the way through. Absolutely. And then a person tell you, yeah, but that's not what that is. Right. Yeah. This is new. And you're like, but he said, he said to generation, and I'm going to stay with your people. And all of a sudden he swaps himself out. Mm-hmm. And then because we don't do this as a people. When we have children, we don't do this. And same way with marriage. If you had a bride, right, and you were betrothed, and he said, this is my expectation, you're supposed to remain without spot or wrinkle, you're supposed to, I'm coming back for you, blah, blah, blah. When he gets back, right, and you don't do that, the expectation should be that, you know what, yeah, but it's okay. Because I've done my part though. Nobody feels like that. If you hold up your part and a person doesn't do their part, you're frustrated, you're upset, you're like, I can't be with a person like that. But somehow we expect the Father to be, well, he's just more understanding than we are. Which means that he understands how much easier it was for you not to do what you did either, because he knows you. So how much more? And then on top of that, if he is the Father, there are plenty of other people who want to serve him, who want to be that way. So why should he then modify his standard because you lowered yours? No, if you find real men, and we don't, because of the curses, we have not, but we're starting to experience them more. We're men who have value for themselves. Real men are like, no. Real men guard their bodies. They're like, I'm not just sleeping with you. Like this, the same way that you feel like you're a prize, I feel like I'm one.
Right.
There are men like that who are just like, no. They don't. And so a real man would be like, you know what? I really did like you, but no. And so how much more then is the Most High a real man?
Right.
Right? Okay, so Revelation 19, and we're going to start at verse 7. It says, let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife has made herself ready. And to her was granted that she should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white, for the fine linen is the righteousness of the saints. And he said unto me, right, blessed are they that are called into the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he saith unto me, these are the true sayings of Yah. Okay? So this idea that, like, you don't see this theme of this righteous woman, righteous bride carried out all the way to the end, it's cut off in modern religion. It stops. But then you don't know then how to function in not only physical marriage, but then also in your spiritual marriage. You don't know the process. So then when you have literally a bridegroom returning, how mad would you be? Let's take it a step further. You have a bridegroom returning, paid the price for my bride, right? And if you've agreed, I left you with a gift, the Ruach is supposed to remind you that you're mine. And then I put overseers over you. And then the overseers hoard you. I put somebody over you to guard you and to teach you and to tell you about me and to tell you about, just like how the servant came to Bethuel's house and he's like, this is what my master has, and these are all the things that master has done for my father. This is what he has in his place, and God has greatly blessed him. And he's like, really? So that is, he's like, you know, you have to follow him, but if you follow him, like and so this is what the servant is supposed to be doing, and it's what he's supposed to be rehearsing to the bride about the bridegroom. He paid for you, and he has all this, and here's a couple of things right now, and here's some other stuff, but there's way more where that comes from, but you just have to do X, Y, Z. You have to stay with your eye on him, and when you get ready to see him, I'm going to point him out, and that's him, and when you got people now who are going to be repulsed when they see the Hamashiach. Because Satan has also put up overseers over the people. And they've convinced him, oh, but I know you're betrothed to him, but you don't have to do nothing he say. You don't have to follow him. You don't have to. And so now you put overseers that made you disdain the one that's paid the bride price for you. So then imagine Hamashiach, where it's like, okay, I'm coming to get mine. I'm coming to reclaim what's mine. And she shouldn't even recognize it. And then I tell her, like, hey, can you make me something to eat? And she brings me pork. You didn't even tell her what I like to eat.
Right.
And now she's defiled. I can't even be with her because she's unclean. How does that work out? So then, can you see making it in a real sense, bringing it to earth, bringing it down to earth, how angry a man would be if he showed up on his wedding day and he found out all his what are they called? Groomsmen had been sleeping with his wife. And they're proud of it. She was like, oh yeah, she good. And then telling her like, oh, but he'll be okay with it because he's a cool dude. Wow. He's a forgiving. can you just a regular wedding? Have you guys seen what's that movie?
Brothers or
The brothers, but was it the brothers or the best man? Right? He couldn't get over that, and he was wrong.
right.
Imagine somebody that's not wrong, and imagine righteous indignation. Everybody would die. Everybody that knew about it, everybody that didn't warn her about it, everybody that just sat around and let it happen. Everybody was like, oh, you know, it's gonna be okay. He's gonna be all right. And then next I'm killing you too. Right? So what is happening is that the churches are preparing the remnant that is within her to be destroyed by the bridegroom. That's how much they care. They don't. They're like, oh, it ain't me, so. There's a line, Lauren has a line, she says, you can't see it if you're not included. You know how, like, you get people who can't be happy for other people? Because it's not about them? My mom says something that's completely different than that. She said, if it ain't about you, it ain't about. But, she does. And I understand what she means. It's like that. When the people who are overseeing our people and who are feeding this information to our people who are overseeing our people, they're training them, which obviously trickles down to the adversary, is training the people to be destroyed. If I can't change who you are, and if I can't change what your inheritance is, then I can teach you to despise it. I can make you like Esau. I can make you like Esau. Remember, that's a twin brother. So you related to him, so you got some of that probably somewhere in some of y'all. And you can be trained to hate your inheritance. You hate it. That is our inheritance. Torah is it. That when Shaul spoke to the Gentiles, he said, you have been removed from the commonwealth of Israel.
Yeah.
He wasn't talking about money.
Yeah.
He was talking about Torah. That is their wealth. That is what makes them prosperous. You have been removed from it. Now they're trying to remove you from it. Remove you from your inheritance, make you despise it. They don't want it. And then in return, make you detestable to the one that's been sent to redeem you. So when you're looking at the betrothal process, and we begin as women to prepare our children to enter into marriage, it's so much deeper than that. Everything that we do as a people is to reflect and to show that picture first. So when people are in marriage and we're watching people go into covenant, especially in this way, we have to encourage it and encourage it the correct way. We're not going to just cover up things and people have, oh, I signed a contract late at night. Well, we're going to fix that then. We're gonna fix that so that you both are operating and functioning in Torah. Because what you can do is, in a feminine sense, is you can make a woman hate her inheritance. A lot of women have fallen into idolatry and into paganism and into other things because of the incorrect application of Torah. Right. And the incorrect application of their role. And it's made them hate this way and this walk because it's been presented to them poorly and it's been carried out poorly. And then in return, though, not only is the man responsible because he's responsible for it, he's supposed to be watching her with the word, but then you won't even teach her the word because you're a woman, you ain't supposed to get the word. You ain't supposed to know that. This is what I say. But you're supposed to be watching in the word because just like as a nation, you are a bride prepared for a groom. Individually, likewise. And so, if you want Yah to be harsh and to not show you and not be that way with you, then yeah, do it to her. You're supposed to be a reflection of him so that then she can see Torah and see him and see a loving father, even if she didn't have one. And likewise, he's going to be that way with you. That's why it says, yeah, your prayers will be hindered. I think it's Peter. He's like, oh, yes, if you mistreat your spouse, I have to hinder your prayers, because if you can't share and grow her, how then am I supposed to share and grow you? Right. It's a jacket process. I mean, like, I just go all day. I really could. But I'll run those down again just so if somebody caught it at the end. So, first part of marriage, is the choice, the choosing of a wife. We want to relate it back to Yah. He chose us from the foundation of the earth, period. The reason why he created a world and built it the way he did was not to prove to us that he could do things.
Right.
It was so that when he chose a nation of people, that nobody could say nothing about it.
Right.
So he chose. Okay? And then betrothal precedes marriage. Okay? And the idea of the bride price. Betrothal as marriage, and then the betrothal between Yah and his people. That is what, as we're married and as we're living, it's supposed to be a reflection of that. The forgiveness. That's why the idea of divorce is given from the hearts of your heart. Yeah, your heart's hard. Because there should be forgiveness there. He don't have to, and he does. He's perfect. The party that has not committed offense has the right to hey, it's on you. You messed up. You choose it. It's over. Not on me. I don't feel bad, right? But he still pursues even after offense. Yet somehow, when we who have been forgiven much can't forgive, and can't receive forgiveness, that doesn't quite add up, right? You've been forgiven a lot,
Right.
right? And then the idea of then, if you sin, then obviously you won't sin no more. Don't keep doing the same thing over and over again. That'll just kill you. But so that process. Okay, so we're dealing with the Hebraic custom. We have to look at it that way. We have to do things lawfully because it says, the verses came out of my head. I want to say it's in Deuteronomy, but he says, "Who is this people that has an Elohim that is that close to them, and who has laws that make them so wise?"
Yeah.
We're supposed to live in a way that people go, "Dang, like whatever they're doing is working." The fact that we're living, a lot of us in Torah, and still not working, so we're not doing it right. There's nothing wrong with Torah. No matter what they're telling the church, there's nothing wrong with his law. There's something wrong with you. What is it?
Deuteronomy 4:6.
Deuteronomy 4:6. There's nothing wrong with Torah. There's something wrong with you. And he's like a really good father. You don't like this food? All right, get from the table. You hungry? Same food right in front of you. Every single time. It's Torah. It's Torah. It's Torah. It's good. It's good. It's good. It works. You need to fix your palate. This works. And it works in everything. It works in marriage, it works in relationship, and it works in life, period. And that's how we are called blessed. If we're not receiving the blessings, it's because we're not doing it. We were blessed in captivity too. If you read through our history, we're blessed in captivity, and when we walk in it as a nation, we are also released from captivity. I'm going to say this every time I get in front of a group of people. I want to go home. And whoever in this room is holding me up, call me. So I can yell at you, and you can yell at me, and then we can get it together. Because I do. I want to go home. I'm tired. It's not going to get any better here. And if one of us, if we're being blessed individuals, it does not affect the collective, and you can't be just okay with getting yours.
Yeah.
I'm not okay with that, and nobody else should be. All right. Questions or comments?
What about like the whole it's almost like this traditional Hebrew people? It's a lot of us, that are missing the mark, and it's impossible to have those kind of conversations. One, because you're a woman, you're completely ridiculous. I don't know what you've been listening to. Or two, it's just no, this is what it is, and you guys are off. You're not understanding it. This is the precepts. We're not really looking to be moved in the spirit. This is the law. Like low key, the Pharisees came back. We can't. I don't know if we're gonna be able to change them at all.
The one thing that I hold as a consolation for that. I've been to the land, and the thing outside of all the fabulous things I walked away with, I met a bunch of different people, and everybody did something a little different. And what it showed me was that there is no way, if you were non-messianic, if you go and you see that, there is no way that we can live as a people without somebody ruling over us.
Right.
Because one of the positives about Moshe being a physical leader was that when he said something, people did it. When Moses broke that golden calf and ground it up and said, "Drink it," You gotta be a bad dude to make somebody drink dirt and gold. You do. You do. Why did they do it? Because a couple things. Respect. He was the one that was anointed at that time. And two, couldn't nobody whoop him. He still had all of his strength when he died. When we are governing the people, the one thing that we don't have is everybody is divided because they don't accept one leader. We have to have one leader, and it has to be somebody can't nobody whoop. And so right now we have all these breaks and divides, and you have people who are just like, it doesn't matter what you show them, it can be as clear as day. And they won't see it because of pride. You can't have pride in front of you. All these tough dudes are gonna literally, have you seen that? There's a meme on I wish I had it, on Instagram, and it was a guy, he's like, all those people saying X, Y, and Z about the Hamashiach, and this little boy in the car, and he's ready to get whooping. He's like, I'm sorry! No! And he's like screaming this little, and I was like, that's hilarious, because even the toughest of them will submit, because he rules with the rod of iron. And I think it's not to say that we should not be working toward it, but just like anything else, a hard head makes us all right. And what'll happen is, for those who were able to be corrected and were able to be humble, those are the ones that rule in the kingdom. All these people who are loudmouth and lying, right, will be servants. They won't be, I'm not servants like in the sense of what, but they will not be great in the kingdom because you lack humility. How can I choose you to lead when you had the ear of the people during the awakening, you turn more people away than you drew? Then you also have to come and learn. All of us will be learning, but I talk about this all the time because I know there's people and we all have like these different calendars and all this stuff. I tell people all the time, the difference between a person who says, I'm not doing anything, and a person that says, I'm going to do the best I can with what I have is, the person that says, I'm going to do the best I can, if they were given the absolute truth, they would change that day. Not what you thought was the truth, but if literally Hamashiach was like, this is it. Thursday. Shabbat's on Thursday. You'd be like, Thursday it is. Yeah. But there are people where you're like, hey, let's say on a reason, I don't want to hear nothing about none of that. It's like, okay, well then, if you don't believe it, you just going to hell. You're like, wow, I'm just trying to understand it. And the same way they don't receive anything. Where you'll be like, look, literally information's come out that what you said was a complete lie. Right. And they'll be like, so you ain't rocking with the truth? That's right. Right. It is. Yeah. Anybody else? Comment? Even? Does that be a question? No? You do?
Oh, okay, well,
yep.
This might be a little deep, but.
Go ahead.
Now, you know when you spoke about the Commonwealth? Now, do you think that Gentile that we saying that you were separated from the Commonwealth of Israel, was that the northern kingdom, or do you think that was Gentile? We have it saying when we say Israel, Gentile.
Right, or Gentile. Yeah. Israel who thought they were Gentiles or Gentile.
Right.
You know, that is a really...
Because at that point they were separated.
They were.
And so when he was speaking to them, he said, now you
can be received.
But at this point you were no longer part of the Commonwealth.
It's called a wild branch.
Yeah, and that's it's one of those things you got to go through and be like, oh, this Gentile is.
Right, because he does make a big distinction between which Gentile it is. I'm going to go back. So in Ezekiel, two sticks. Ezekiel. So he talks about the 2 sticks, and one of the things he mentions, he says, to Judah and his companions, and to Israel, or to Joseph and his companions. So you get this idea that there are those, they obviously broken apart, and one is definitely a wild branch, but then they also have companions. Right. So I think in that sense, it could be both, because it's the same law to the stranger and to the homeborn. There's a difference between a stranger and a sojourner too. Sojourner, any of us can be a sojourner, but a stranger is like, no, you're strange to my people. So the stranger only has an inheritance in Torah when they link up with the people, with the family. This whole idea that the Most High is polygynous and he has like a Christian family and a Buddhist family and like, or just like a secular family that doesn't really have to do anything. Like, how would that work in a family? Like, it wouldn't, right? So I think in that sense it's both. But for sure, Israel has been scattered, and they have to also remember, like they thought they were Gentiles.
Just like us.
We thought we were Gentiles. Right. So I think in that sense, it would have been both. Like, okay, you're right to this. He said, oh, but there were some of you don't boast against these natural branches.
Exactly.
So you in, but
you
remember that
have to do.
Exactly. You have some qualifications. And I was just reading this story on Passover. It was one of the things. He was like, okay, if they want to be in, this is how it works. There is a process. Like this whole idea that you can do anything in that Torah was never for the Gentile. He's like, I'm going to make you an insight to the nation to draw people.
Yeah, to teach the whole world.
Right. You have to teach them how to live under Torah. Period. There's no other way to live.
Two things.
There's people, speak up.
When the Egyptians came out, when God took the people of God out of Egypt, and some of the Egyptians came with them, there were certain things that they had to do to partake of Israel. So it shows us back then that God never forgot about the Gentile people, because he showed in that area when he brought some of the Egyptians out with him, he began to tell them certain things that the Egyptians had to do to take part of Israel. But they had to come into his people, not his people coming to them. And number two, when she was talking about the blindness, sometimes we get frustrated when people don't hear. This is my God blinded us, so he has to be the one to wait, because someone don't get it then. Right. Just like you didn't believe it one time, they'll come around if that's who God is going to open up their eyes to let them see.
And some people are just blind and they won't.
And
He said, I have stopped up their ears, and I have closed their eyes, and he also makes a stumbling block, because we're supposed to be using our due diligence. One of the things we see in the Brit Kaddish New Testament, he talks about the Bereans, and it talks about them trying the people according to the word.
That's right.
They were counted as righteous for that. A lot of things I see with like a lot of camps who like, I don't believe nothing in the New Testament. I'm like, yeah, because if people practice some of the principles that they practice, some of y'all wouldn't even exist. Because if people were actually trying these people in the word every time they got up to speak, and not just going, oh yeah, that feels good. Oh yeah, that sounds good. And then I get people tell me, I'm confused. Yeah, you're confused because you don't have Torah to give you discernment. So that sounded good, and then when I told you what I said, that sounded good, but you didn't match either one up to the word. And then to your first thing about them coming out and having to do those things, they did. The people, when Yah passed over, when the angel, the Malach, passed over the people in Egypt, everybody had to do something. We find out by the time that he sends the hail, that it said that everyone who leaves their cattle out will be destroyed. So guess what? Some of the Egyptians was like, put my cattle away. This first few was a little rough. So they had to begin, because of the plagues, to begin to follow. Same way in these coming times with Jacob's trouble. As we begin to navigate through these disasters and these things that are going to happen, and we watching it like, how did you make it out? Oh, because of, you'll be like, okay, next time I'm going to make sure and so that's why it says, when you are redeemed, when you leave, they will grab to your coattail. They're going to come to you, they're like, look, I'm not standing being destroyed. If the Most High is with you, I'm with you. And so it was that same picture.
Zechariah chapter 8 tells us that they're going to grab the hold to the skirt of him that is a Jew and say, you're going to go with you.
Right. It's a cyclical process. All of these things are things all the way through. I'll give you another one just for people who like to study. Follow that woman at the well motif all the way. That woman at water, it literally goes all the way through scripture. All the way through. And you'll get, oh yeah, we're good. Yeah. Are they done too?
No, I'm going to start with them.
Okay. Yeah, we're good. Okay, so we'll break and then we'll eat and then we'll talk more as time goes on.
Shabbat shalom, ladies. I know that was, well, how do I say it? I know we're probably hungry.